So a few weeks ago, I put some pentatonic exercises online. It was a PDF with a whole series of different ways of playing pentatonic scales. And when I was chatting to some guys afterwards, I pointed out that I have a similar set of 3 notes per string exercises as well. So I thought I'd talk about them this week. Now, originally I created these in order to develop my hammer-on from nothing technique, my legato technique. But once I created them, I realised that these were a really good picking exercise as well, so picking 3 notes per string type scales as well as legato over them. Now, just like before, I've put all of this on a PDF, so feel free to just grab hold of that and download it. I'll put a link in the description or somewhere on this video as well, so you can get hold of that. There's a whole series of them in there as well, so it's well worth downloading them because I'm only going to scrape the surface. But anyway, as I say, originally I created these for a series of legato exercises. And so the way I came up with them was this, basically. When you're playing legato, you really can't have 2 notes that are repeated next to each other. That's the problem. So what I wanted to do, what I was doing was just looking at little short phrases, and I wanted to create a 4-note phrase that uses 3 notes that you find on a string. Yeah? So I wanted to create 4-note phrases based on those, and I wanted to know how many 4-note phrases there were that I could make out of that. And I discovered there are actually only 3 of them. Because you've got 3 notes to work with, I wanted to use all 3 notes, but I wanted to create a 4-note phrase, therefore one of the notes had to be repeated. So you find one of the phrases is this, where the first note's repeated. The second phrase is this. That's where the second note's repeated, and the third phrase is... Yeah, okay? Now, you can start these, if you imagine you just start to loop those. Now, you could start that phrase on any of those 4 notes, but fundamentally it's the same phrase, okay? Now, the next thing I was interested in is what happens if I start to mix these across 2 strings. If I keep this same basic pattern, but instead of just playing it on 1 string, I use all of the combinations of notes that I can find between 2 strings. And when I do that, each one of these phrases turns into a group of 16 phrases. So there's 48 separate little exercises that I've put on the PDF that you can download. Basically what they are is those 3 seed phrases then mapped across 2 strings. And obviously I've just picked 2 strings to draw these out, but you could use any pair of strings anywhere on the neck on any of the shapes, and that's really where you want to get to with these. Now, what I thought I'd do is just quickly run through a few of these phrases. Firstly, how I'd approach them from a legato point of view, so I'll switch the distortion on because it just makes it that much easier, and I'll talk about what kinds of things I'm thinking about when I'm playing legato. And then I'll use it as a picking exercise, and I'll show you how these can be really quite a powerful way of developing certainly my fingerstyle technique, but also a technique as well if you're using a pick. These are really good for alternate picking development. So let's focus in on the guitar to start with and just look at it from a legato point of view. Okay, so the first pattern tends to be the hardest one from a legato point of view because the index finger is carrying the repeated note. So let's give that a go. So you can see I'm playing on the B string here, up on the 12th fret. Now there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. Because I've got a lot of distortion on, the whole concept of string control is really important. And the way I'm doing this is a combination of the left hand and the right hand. So the left hand is actually touching all of the strings deliberately, so I'm dampening everything right the way up to that G string. Yeah? And then the right hand's doing the hammering on. But the other thing you may not be aware of is when I'm hammering on, my finger's a little bit at an angle, and the reason for that is that it's actually dampening the top E string as well. Yeah? And the same with the middle finger and the little finger. So while I'm playing this phrase, my right hand's in control of that top E, yeah? So that's the first phrase. And then we move on to the next one. Now here what I'm doing is, look at this hand, so my thumb is on that G string still. But when I play that top note, my thumb moves across and controls the B string. You see that? A really, really subtle movement, but that allows me to stay in control of all of the strings, and that's the thing you've really got to work on when you're doing these kinds of patterns. So if I move on to the third one. You see how I'm controlling the B string just while I'm hitting that top E, and then for the fourth one. So it really is kind of a dance between the left hand and the right hand to manage the string control when you're playing these kinds of lines. Okay, so hopefully you can see just how much care and attention I put on string dampening, as well as, you know, actually playing the legato notes. I find, especially with heavy distortion, you really need really good control of the strings. So anyway, let's take that same set of phrases and use it as a picking exercise. So I'm going to do it using my fingerstyle technique, but obviously if you use a pick, they're just as valuable to you as well, so give it a go like that. Okay, so now we're going to move on to picking these lines, and I've taken the distortion off now. Yeah. What I'm going to do is the P-A-M-I, so thumb, third, middle, first pattern that I've spoken about in plenty of previous videos. It's called the tremolo pattern, yeah? Tremolo picking. And what I'm going to do is start with that first pattern again. And just see if I can get that moving. Okay, and then move on to the second. So can you see what's going on there? I'm going thumb, third, second, and then my index finger's playing that top E. And move on to the third. You see this time, my second finger's playing that top E. So I'm keeping that cycle going all the time. But the pattern's dictating which finger's playing which string, yeah? Fourth pattern. So here I'm playing thumb, third, second, first, thumb, third, second, first. So always sticking with that same cycle, thumb, third, second, first, thumb, third, second, first. So that's how I do it, playing fingerstyle. It's a useful pattern as well if you're playing with a pick as well, as you can imagine, because you're changing the strings, depending on the pattern you're playing, you're changing up and down strokes on different strings in different phases across the patterns. So if you're using pick, that would be what I'd suggest you do, is to just try an alternate pick and see how far you can make it through these patterns as well. Now, as I say, it's worth downloading the PDF because there's a lot of material on there. There's probably a lot more material than you might expect on there. And so this kind of thing can keep you going for months if you want to, especially when you start crossing strings, especially when you start working across other patterns as well. So it's the kind of thing that I recommend you just sort of dip in and out of, or use it for 10 minutes every day before you do other kinds of practice sessions. And if you do that, you'll find your picking technique will improve, your legato technique will improve. You'll get much better control of the strings as well if you're focusing on that. So, like I say, it's well worth downloading these. It's well worth exploring the kind of the musical space that you find in these shapes. So that's it for this week, and we'll chat next time. Goodbye.